Welcome back to the Indiewood podcast. I'm Yaro. I'm a director, writer. With me, I have Zina Wild, actor, producer, writer. So we talked about crafting material for ourselves, or our own material, our own short stories, our own features. And you mentioned something about writing what you know. And for me, I've always heard people jumping into writing. They were like, "Oh, write what I know, but I don't know anything." And I'm like, well, it's not like, oh, you're a firefighter, so you write about firefighters. Like, yeah, that's a small part of writing what you know. But for me, it's bringing life experiences into your stories to bring in, like for me, I have a very unique experience with my family, and I utilize that to craft my stories. I think I use not it literally, not the oh, I had an argument with my folks and now it's a story. It's more about kind of the relationship interactions and those I bring into certain moments and scenes. It doesn't necessarily have to be the full story, but it's, I'm relying on the experiences of my life to make a world feel lived in. But then you mentioned something that was kind of interesting is sometimes we write because we need to take something traumatic, maybe, or something uncomfortable, and we put it into script and film in order to be rid of it. So it's not weighing us down. But then if it's successful, it's there and you're living it with it for a while, especially because films take a long time to do. And sometimes you're with it, even a short film, you're with a short film for years. How do you feel about this idea of writing something to get it out of your insides, but then having to live with it for a long time? And how do you manage it?
I think it's a really interesting topic.
Mhm.
And I think that going back to the writing what you know, in a way, you can only write what you know because you're seeing it from your point of view, from your perspective. Every writer that's ever written anything is from their experience, it's from their point of view, it's from their, and that's why it's good. Unless if you're writing something that you're detached from it, I think that there is usually an issue. Like other people can't really. It's like the whole idea: the more personal you make it, the more general it becomes. So uh, making it really personal will touch more people because we're all human. We pretty much all go through the same stuff.
Mhm.
Uh, how is what's interesting, but that's why when you're really going through it, um, you will know the how of it as well. So when something is really hard, one thing that they used to tell us in drama school too was like, put your heartbreak into your art.
Mhm.
Put it there and then heal your heart by that.
Therapy without the life.
Exact. Which in a way, I love that. But there is that part that's like,
It can be
yeah,
dangerous.
yes,
Yeah.
because it's also like, well, I want to live a happy life. I don't want to keep on
Thinking about
remembering
this
this
traumatic
moment
moment.
that was terrible and reliving it and never letting it go. Because how do you let it go if you're working on it all the time? So my approach to this is a little bit somewhere in the middle.
Mhm.
Because also I think that in order for the piece to be served the best, you have to have a little bit of detachment of growing to, if let's say you're walking down the line, you're not in the beginning of the line, you're somewhere in the middle, closer to the end when you're writing about it. So you've had some resolve on it, on the subject. So you're able to see it from, oh, right, I was there, now I'm here. And
Yeah, you've emotionally progressed through it. You're utilizing it after you've healed a little bit, is what
yes,
you're saying. Okay.
I think so. I think that that's important. And if you're not, if you're doing it while you're doing it and
While you're healing.
while you're healing and while you're in pain and it makes you feel better, that's great too, because that's healing and that's more important than anything. Like you being in a good place is, to me, it's like the whole, there's no better project to work on than yourself. So if you feel better, then that's great because then the next thing you're going to make, you're going to be making it from a better feeling place. So that's a good way to do it as well. But also while you're doing it. So let's say you haven't healed and you want to write about this traumatic experience and you're doing it and you're putting yourself in there practically. I think it's important to do something else at the same time that takes you out of it, that reminds you that, all right, I can do this. That makes me feel good. That reminds me that there's more to my life than this event.
Yeah.
There's more to me than this situation. Because I don't think it's very healthy to get so wrapped up and 24/7
Yeah.
in that perspective, because it completely envelops you.
When I write, sometimes I've never been diagnosed with ADD or anything like that, but I feel like there must be something in that realm, because I either have a hard time focusing on doing something that's important to me, screenwriting, or a hyper focus, and like the day's just gone.
Sure.
And so my current project of myself is to find a way to trigger this ability to hyper focus and then pull out of it after like an hour or two. And I'm trying to make it a superpower instead of like a not.
Yes.
And to add to what you were saying about kind of, write something traumatic in order to kind of, maybe heal from it, or maybe, you've kind of grown away from it. I had a moment in my life where I had not something traumatic, but something that bummed me out.
Sure.
And I wrote a movie about it.
Yeah.
But it wasn't necessarily a movie about that literal event. I had a feeling of wanting to run away. And I remembered that line from Futurama where he goes, I don't want to be on this planet anymore. And so I wrote a movie about going to Mars. And it became something more, I think, from that. But I really tried to condense the feeling of my experience and then make a movie about that.
Totally.
The literal story it's completely unrelated, but that feeling was the same. And I think maybe, that's another way to look at, right? What is I wanted someone else to have that feeling.
Absolutely.
Like,
I completely agree with what you're saying, because the short that I just finished is about, I thought that I was dying. I felt like I was dying from the heartbreak. And I was like, I think, and then that's how it started. It's not literally the same thing.
It's about, for people who didn't listen to last episode, it's a movie about everyone having an app, a mandatory app on their phone that tells you when you're going to die.
Yeah.
And you get a courtesy call 24 hours before. And it's a movie about a woman played by you getting that courtesy call.
Yeah. And it goes exactly with what you're saying, that it doesn't have to be a literal thing, but it's just like, listen to the feeling, because the feeling will also tell you creatively. Because sometimes people are like, but I don't know how to write and I don't know how to get ideas. And it's like, just sit with I really truly believe that, especially actors, because they read so many scripts that it just exercises that part of your brain that you're like, half of the stories are the same. They're all like, there's no virgin idea anymore. And it's not about that. So it's like, yeah, sure, people would be like, oh yeah, I've heard that before. And so who cares? It's like, but that's your version of it. And I think it's so important. And yeah.
Another thing I want to kind of unpack is, sometimes maybe what I, quote unquote, write what I know is a little more literal. I have a really strong relationship with my mom. And so a lot of my stories are about women. And I feel like it's me trying to unpack what my mom did for me, like in a good way, how much support she gave me and how much growth I had because of her. But also like, trying to understand the female perspective, because I'm like a dude, straight cis man.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's hard to be like, can I write a story about a woman? But I'm not really writing a story about a woman. I'm writing about my mom.
Sure.
And or even that feeling of like parent to child. I don't necessarily write like, oh, I can write women better. Like, no, it's not about that. It's about me unpacking like what it feels like to be a mother.
Sure.
What it feels like to be a parent. What it feels like to be a son, And so those are all different movies and all different stories. I write stories not necessarily about a mother or about what it feels like to be a mother or a woman, but that feeling.
Sure.
Like I wrote a movie about a a mother going after a superhero because he accidentally killed her daughter, and when he was finding his nemesis. And I wrote that about like kind of from this feeling that I got from my mom is what does it feel like to be so overprotective, or to even lose something like that because of the relationship we have. It's a little unique, not to kind of air my laundry to everybody on a pod, but like it is a unique relationship that's different from any other relationship I've seen people have with their moms.
Sure.
And so I wrote this story, and it feels lived in, and it feels alive, and the character feels alive because it's like I'm refracting it through the prism of my own, craft. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's sometimes hard because there's a lot of baggage there to unpack.
Sure.
But it doesn't necessarily have to feel like that experience, like you said. It can be a feeling,
Absolutely.
and when we explore stories that are difficult for us, a thing that we have to relive, but that feeling can be transformed into a story.
Yeah. And I think it can be an amazing way to heal for sure. And that's great, because if that's the purpose, then that's perfect. But it can also be a little dangerous to get stuck in it.
Yeah.
So I think it's important to take sport a little bit of that.
To add to that, and kind of piggybacking off of the previous episode, it doesn't have to go anywhere. You can just be done with it, and it disappears into not the balcony, the shelf of your creative world life. Yeah, and it's gone. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a movie. In college, I was a singer-songwriter, and like I played open mics, I did shows, but I wrote music. I think I wrote like, I don't know, 50 songs.
Oh, wow.
Over the course of a couple of years, all because it was just therapy.
Wow.
I was like, I need to get this out. I had all these things to say, and I did it. And then when I was done, I put my guitar down and I didn't play ever.
Wow.
Like I still tinker every now and then, but I don't have this incessant pull to like, it doesn't need to come out of me.
Yeah, wow.
And with screenwriting, it does. I think I've transferred this output into screenwriting.
That's amazing.
Yeah. And I think this is something kind of similar, that's happening with you are an actor.
It's okay.
And you had a really robust career. And then, in episode 2, you were talking about how people were like, you write it.
Yeah. I mean, I really was like, I don't know where to start. I have no idea.
How did you come to this concept of write what you know?
Because it was honestly in the frontal part of my brain, and I couldn't. I think that I'm a little OCD, so I can't stop obsessive thoughts sometimes. And it was a part to get it out of the head. And that was, I think, one reason why.
Yeah. Because if you have something that's important in your life or difficult, you think about it all the time, and then you have to put it on paper.
And when I think of any writer that I love, screenwriter, novelist, or whatever, they do write about their experience.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm drawn to. So like, I think my favorite writer is Henry Miller. And he so writes what he's going, like it's autobiographical.
Yeah.
So it's, to me, and the way that he writes it is because that's how he experiences it. That's how the eyes that he sees through it. So to me, I'm like, that's great. And in a way, it's almost like people can be like, oh, that's so self-involved or this or that. And it's like, well, how are you going to, if you try to do something, maybe someone that's really skilled and has incredible imagination, they can do that. But for me, I don't know how to do that. I just don't. I just write what I know and what I feel like it's taking over my life in said moment in time.
Yeah. I want to mention something about writing what you know, because I've seen a couple of movies in the last couple of years. One recently that came out about a civil war, wink, wink. And there are these creatives who have really strong opinions. I don't necessarily think that maybe that statement is quote unquote in touch. And I don't want to say these people are out of touch. That's not what I'm saying. But they're really kind of clear, distinct opinions. about issues that are very complicated.
Sure.
And it's not just, Civil War and Alex Garland, because, from what he made from what I've heard, I haven't seen the film yet, but, I haven't seen the film yet because it's a difficult thing for me to watch due to, the war in Ukraine and me having family in Russia and Ukraine. I just didn't want to see it yet. And so he made a statement from everything that I've kind of heard about, war. And for me, having experienced it, it was like, I disagree with that. And I still have to see it to really kind of, understand where he was coming from. But I sometimes think that, there are things that are off limits.
Oh, yeah.
When
Yeah.
you are like, I have an opinion, I'm smart, I make movies. I'm sorry, I don't want to feel like I'm talking crap about Alex Garland. He's a great filmmaker.
Mm-hmm.
But, there is, I think, a limit where people think that, oh, I know. I'm going to write what I know. But then I don't think that there's this depth of feeling and knowledge and experience to really make it feel complex,
And it's true. And then sometimes when it's not complex, it doesn't register.
Feels out of touch.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that can happen for sure. And I mean, I think that there is also something to be said about the world we live in right now. People are so careful about saying anything.
Yeah.
Also, that they're not saying anything. So it's like, I will do 35 focus groups so that no one's offended.
Yeah.
But then nothing is said because no one's offended.
Yeah.
And that's something too. And it's like, okay, so we are in a very sensitive era right now that there's the good side of it, there's the bad side of it, there's with these big subjects, I think that it becomes more complicated. But for something that I feel like it's
personal,
my personal thought is that people are becoming a little scared to be personal.
Yeah.
And that's where it's a problem. Like, it's like, I'd rather talk about the big things that are out there instead of what's going on here, which is really what you're going through. And what all of us is the human experience. And I think that is, I lose interest in the things that aren't personal these days because everyone is so afraid to be personal.
I want to say that maybe, it's a complicated issue that it's going to take a lot longer to unpack than the time we have left for this episode. But you're right. I think, there's maybe a social need to have an opinion or to, back a certain take.
Mm-hmm.
And then maybe, because we're so informed now, there's so much information and misinformation out there. How do you stay informed and then have a experience about it and then write about it?
Yeah.
It's like, well, I think maybe that's not necessarily the process. It's not about like, oh, I have an experience about, American politics, so let me write about it. Like, no. How do you feel?
Yeah.
Do you feel scared? Do you feel, happy? Do you feel like, what is your personal experience? And that's
totally. Like, how does it influence you on your daily life? How does it make you drink your tea? Like, like, how does it all, like, it's just, I think that's the actor in me that becomes like, how you see this thing is how, because it's true, if you're depressed, how are you going to drink your tea is different than if you're really joyful.
Yeah.
And that's the art in it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what kind of color are you going to use? It's not just green. What kind of green? Like, what kind of whatever. So it's the details.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I like that, it's kind of silly to think like, oh, how do you have breakfast in the morning if you're happy and you're sad? But it's when it comes to writing screenplays, that's an important perspective to have. Like, if you have an experience that makes you feel a certain way, that can be reflected onto your story. It doesn't necessarily have to be literal.
No.
But, it can color a moment, it can color a scene, it can color a whole story arc. And I think, when we want to break it down, it's a more complicated issue. It's not just like, oh, how to be sad, write that,
Right.
What it feels like to be a man or a woman or a person of color or, an immigrant, it's write that. It's more feeling.
It's more, and there's something also to be said. What's really cool is writing the opposite. So when you're feeling a certain way, to just do it because it's almost like when on camera as an actor, you're supposed to, like, you're talking about something sad, and instead of trying to make yourself cry, it's try to make yourself not cry.
Interesting.
So that is the most interesting way.
Can you unpack that a bit more? Like,
Mhm.
so when you're either acting out a scene that's supposed to be a sad moment, or writing a scene that's supposed to be a sad moment, when you do the opposite, what does that mean? Can you?
It means that it's the survivor in you, because we do this in life every day. If you something is really bad, like you're feeling bad or you're ashamed or you're trying to overcome it, you're not trying to stay in it. So the more you act from that perspective, the better it becomes, because it's so active in you that it's going to come out anyway.
In a certain way, you're not suppressing it, but you're kind of suppressing it.
You're trying to overcome it.
Okay.
You're like, actually, if you are about to cry, and what you do is try to hold the tears, it's way more interesting to watch.
That's interesting. And so trying to kind of shift that over to screenwriting, I think that makes for more dynamic characters too, because you have a sad character like, oh, I'm going to cry now. But then they're like, no, let's hold back this moment.
Yes.
How does the character explode or not explode, or how do they, simmer? I think that's really cool.
It's so much more interesting to watch. And it's like, we literally do this in life every day. Let's say someone is like loving their job and they get fired. In the moment, in real life, they're not going to start crying and start begging. That's going to...
Some people do. But yeah,
Some
but you're
people
right.
do.
It is more interesting.
But it's way more interesting to see that person be in this moment of like heartbreak. And like, I can't show this right now. I'm going to save it for when I go home, and I'm going to cry my eyes out.
Or even like, how does me holding it in, the general me holding it in, affect my part?
Yeah.
Or I think that's really cool.
Yeah.
Really cool thing to. I'm gonna use that.
Yeah.
I didn't ever think about that. That's really cool. Yeah.
It's to me, it's my favorite thing, because the last thing you want to see is a person. I mean, you want to see them, but only the very end. Like you want that moment, but it can't start there.
Well, I hope that people are going to explore more about writing what they know. We kind of dove into a couple of concepts and things that maybe you should avoid or don't. I mean, do whatever you want. It's art. It's, you're going to piss people off, or you're going to make people happy. You're going to make people disinterested. Write what you know. Write happy stuff, sad stuff. Zina, thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, we'll see you next week.
Yes.
All right, take care, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you for listening to the Indiewood Podcast. You can find us on anywhere you find your podcasts, and on Instagram at IndiewoodPod. See you next time.
From the CFA Network, Cinematography for Actors is bridging the gap through education and community building. Find out about us and listen to our other podcast at cinematographyforactors.com.
Cinematography for Actors Institute is a 501c3 nonprofit. For more information on fiscal sponsorship, donations, because we're tax exempt now, so it's a tax write-off, and upcoming education, you can email us at contact@cinematographyforactors.com. Thanks.